So I'm creating a pack. In this, I'm creating new package. We call that as interface test. Okay. I just do this because just for your practice, and if you see more time, you know how to create like project. So I create a class. In the class, first class, it's the same as inheritance, only there is a little bit of difference. So in abstraction, we don't want to see the implementation of the object. We just want to give more in abstraction is we wanted to hide the implementation details. It's just giving an idea. So giving an idea is called just an idea is called abstraction, but we are not doing any implementation. We're just hiding the whole implementation from the abstracted layer, and we just give the idea first, and then we'll try to implement that idea in another classes. So how we are going to do abstraction is we are going to see right now. So first of all, I'm creating an interface, not a class. Interface, we have to create an interface. Right click new. Here instead of class, we have to create interface. Okay. So here I create an interface called browser. Last time we have created a class called browser. Here we are creating a interface called browser. So when I have an interface, I can have methods which are not implemented at all. Like for example, I can have public void, load browser. So, but I don't need to do an implementation. Means I don't need to write any code for this function. You just need to write your just the definition of the function, like public. What does it return? What is the name of the function? Where do we implement? We implement when we inherit it. Okay. So it's just an idea that a browser should have some variables or something like that, and then should have some functions. So just a prototype of everything, but they don't really implement anything as part of an interface. Okay. So public void, you know load browser, load URL. So public void get version. So let's say for example you have some three functions like this. So in an interface, you don't do any implementation. Pretty much you don't do any implementation or write logic for what does this function do. I mean, you don't really tell what this function will do. You just give an idea that I am having a browser here, and then that browser does these three behaviors, but I'm telling like what does that behavior should look like. I don't tell that. But whenever someone is implementing it, or someone is implementing this interface, then they will tell how it will work, but the idea will be still common. For example, now I have a Firefox browser. Okay. So here I have a Firefox browser, so which is implementing some idea called browser. Means it is implementing a common idea called browser. Okay. The keyword is implements. Okay. Implements browser. So when we say implements browser, automatically it is giving an error. So if you see that error, if you just highlight it,
exiting narrator.
oh sorry. Okay, I don't know what's happening with the, it should give errors, but okay, I will do this like this. So we should have all these three classes, so which should be implemented here. Means you should write logic for all those three ideas that were coming from your base class. Okay. So you have a class which is implementing some idea called browser. So previously when we are doing inheritance, there was some implementation also here. We were adding extra implementation, like we are trying to add something new or something that has to be changed. Here we are not giving we are not implementing at all. We are completely overriding all the methods that are present in the interface in the next class, which is called Firefox browser. Because so the person who is giving an idea is telling that, okay, this is the prototype or this is the design how your browser should look like. I'm not telling how you should implement it, but you should have all these components. And whoever is implementing it, they'll add on whatever it should look like, and then they'll follow that. For example, this will be like a standard. and when whoever is implementing this one will follow all those standards and derive each and everything what has to be done. So for example, now you create one more browser, still they have the same base idea, they don't do any implementation. When they call it, they don't have anything in the interface level, but when we create a new another browser, they have to do their own implementation. So when I call Chrome browser, again implements, so I say browser, so, and still I get an error because all the methods that are present in interface should be implemented here. So you are trying to now just if you get an error, just to do click this. So now what you are trying to do, you are implementing all the unimplemented methods that are present here, because you are just inheriting the idea, and you don't have any implementation details on the base idea. So who has hidden all the implementation details? He has just given the idea, and you are trying to take that idea and implement it in your new browser. If you ask me, it will help in testing. I don't see any as such a value as in testing, because we don't follow any design methodologies. But if you are doing something in an abstracted manner, or if you want someone to follow some rules, so you can add interfaces. But I don't really see at an interface level kind of automation testing that we have to, I mean, automation code that you have to write. But it's good to know. So whenever you call an interface, it's not a class. You will have only methods, and that methods will not be implemented at all. So which is considered as an idea. So generally think that I have an idea for an object or a fan or something. I am giving an idea, and then whoever is taking that idea has to tell what each and every step that it will do. So that's the whole objective of having an interface. So it's a completely overriding all the functions that we have. Previously we used to override on the need basis. Means if you want to take some feature and it doesn't fit your requirement, then you used to go and override in the Chrome browser. Here it's complete overriding. Like you don't tell what you have, you don't even tell like what you have implemented. You are asking the other person to implement everything. Any questions?
No, Bharat.
Okay.
I'm good too.
And again, it will not go into code of this complex level, but in Java it's better to understand why interfaces. So mostly inheritance is the good thing, that you can use it in your projects, because the common mechanism where you have to write your logic and you override the logic if you don't need it. But interfaces and all, if you want someone, like say you have written a comparison class, and you want everyone to do string compare, int compare, or long compare, only these three comparisons, and you don't want to these three comparisons are mandatory. So in that case, what you will do, a compare.java, and then you just define these three methods. How does they compare these strings in how the way that they implement the logic, you don't mind. But for example, anything that you say compare should have these mandatory things, and anyone who is implementing should write the logic for those three compares, like int compare or string compare, or from a long compare. When it is int compare, so generally we use all the logic is completely written these days, right? Java and all, you will say just this is equal to that, is this equal to that, true or false, then it will just pass or fail. But if you want to write your own logic, not the logic that is Java following, or it is faster than yours, so you still, if you implement it, you can write your own logic. So that's the idea. But you can either follow it or mostly in testing I don't see any value in adding these pieces, but it's good to know. The second one is abstract classes. The same way as we hear, it's half and half. It's not either a class nor an interface. Okay. So the next one is abstract classes. I'll create one more package, new package, abstraction. So in the abstraction, right click, new. I'm creating a new class. So here I'm just taking the class as abstract class. Okay. So we create a normal class only. For example, we create a browser, and this is still a class. We are making that class as using a keyword abstract. So when I use a keyword abstract and I have these three methods, right, the way that it was implemented here, I'll copy them, I'll paste it here. So this is kind of half and half. Half and half, if I say, so you can have some of the methods that are implemented and some of the methods you can leave it to the person who is getting it. Like for example, in the class before browser, so we used to have 5 methods. In that, one method was not useful for the person who is calling it. So then he adds its own implementation and overrides the implementation. That's called overriding, right? Here, if you want to leave it to the other person, you can use an abstract keyword. Means this method you don't know what to do and you're leaving it to the third person, the person who is calling it. This method, you know the implementation and you just write some logic here. And this method, you know something and you write the logic here. So the thing is, here in abstract classes, this is half and half. This is not a class, this is not neither an interface. This half you know what to implement and half you don't know what to implement. The ones that you know the implementation, that you are having it here, and the ones that you don't have the implementation, you are leaving it to the one that it is calling. So for now, I'll create one more class called Firefox. So the Firefox browser, in abstraction, it is still extends keyword only because it's a class and it's not complete implementation. Still, it's extends only. So when I extends browser, it automatically tells me that add unimplemented methods. So what I have not implemented here? So I've implemented load browser. I've implemented get version. The one thing that I have not implemented here is this one. This function doesn't have a logic. So that function has to be implemented for sure when you are extending an abstract class. So why this is required in programming languages? If, for example, in the real world, so for example, you're presenting an idea or if you're presenting a prototype, which half of the implementation that you can do, and the rest half you have to leave it to the person who implements it or who uses it. So then you can use abstract classes. The other thing that you need to mainly consider is you cannot create an object for an interface nor an abstract class. For example, if I create a main class here with a main method, okay, so I cannot create an object for the interface that is present here. Okay, so browser b is equal to new browser. I cannot do this because there is no implementation for the methods here. You don't know what a class should be completely defined, loaded and implemented, but in interface is half, right? It doesn't have the implementation at all. It just have the definition. If you say browser.load browser, it doesn't know what to do because there is no implementation at all. So you cannot create an object for the interface. In the similar fashion, you cannot create an object for the abstract class because you know the half in the implementation of two pieces, but you still don't know implementation of one thing, which is still you don't know what to do. So means you cannot create an object here also. Browser b is equal to new browser. How can you create an object for an interface? Is browser b is equal to new Firefox browser, because the prototype that you are getting, the browser, still that is good because there are three methods which nothing, there is no implementation at all. But if you go to Firefox browser, this has the implementation. You can say sysout, the implementation here, the implementation here and the implementation here. But these methods are still from the design of the browser, but the implementation you can still fetch from the next class that has been implemented it. So you can do an object creation, like for example, browser b equal to new Firefox. This browser b is like polymorphed. You can change it to either Firefox, either change it to Chrome, or either you change it to IE Explorer. Doesn't matter, it can change it to anything. But the only thing here is you're calling an interface, not a class here. And interface doesn't have any implementation. It has only implemented in the one that it was called. So that's how it works, interface and abstract classes. So when I take classes, if you see here, when I take classes, the classes are completely implemented. And when we call those classes, we tail extends and we add additional features. Okay. So we inherited something and we are trying to add some extra features. So that's what we are doing in the inheritance. In an interface, we have only defined the structure and we don't know what to do. We are completely overriding the interface to make sure the person whoever calls it will do the implementation. So we are hiding object internal details. We're just giving the definition here. That's abstraction. The same thing with abstract classes also. So we have the abstract classes where we know half of it and half of the things we don't know. So it's in partial idea. So that half of the things that you have written the code, and the rest you are leaving it to the person whoever it is calling it. So it is only for helping you through layers of just making sure that you follow some rules or you follow some techniques. But in testing, it'll not go to this level. If you want to use inheritance, is a very good concept, you can use it. Abstraction, if you want to use interfaces or abstract classes, if you're very sure about what you're trying to do, use it. Otherwise, if you don't know, I mean, just ignore them. Okay, any questions? Sid?
I'm good, Bharat.
Yeah, Uma?
I'm good too.
Amrita? Amrita, you have any questions? Or you good? Okay, cool. So the next thing that we'll see is exception handling. Okay. So we will see exception handling. So file, new. I'm creating a new Java project. So this is very important, exception handling. And we have to do everywhere, wherever it is. File, new, Java project. I'm taking exception handling. Okay. So I'm taking the exception handling here. So in the exception handling, I'm trying to create a new class. So, and then we'll try some exceptions. Okay. Okay. Whenever we say exception handling, so I try to, for example, I have a link. Okay. So if I click on the link, there are two actions. There are two actions. One is it will navigate to the wherever it has to get navigated, or it might throw an error. So there is a possibility, right? It might throw an error, means the link might be broken, or it will say I cannot reach to the link, or pretty much you see any exception. So pretty much any exception we see, because it cannot reach through that code, or the link is broken, or pretty much anything. So for example, another example would be like I am expecting an input as an integer. Okay. So if you're expecting an integer, you can pass 2 as a number or 2 as a string. Okay. And there are sometimes what it will do, you'll pass 2 as a string and you internally convert that to integer. So I pass 2 as a string, and then internally in the code, I convert to integer. So this is a possibility because string is a superset. String has numbers, alphabets, and pretty much everything, right? So whereas integers are only integers, it's only numbers. So now if you pass here a, right? So what happens is it will throw an exception, because the alphabet a cannot be converted into two, or a numerical format. Okay, or if you have a conversion, you can convert, but it's not a straightforward one or two. You cannot convert it. Then what it will do, it will throw an exception, because it doesn't know what to do with that, because you're trying to take an alphabet as a string and you're trying to convert to an integer, and it will throw an exception for sure. So what is an exception here? Either if you enter 2 here, it will not throw, it will be proper and it will be an integer. And if you don't give an integer, and if you give any other than integer, it will have a possibility of getting an exception. So there is a possibility of getting an exception. Okay, it's not that you will get an exception, there is a possibility of getting an exception. For example, I go and load this page. Okay, I'm trying to load Google page. So either it will either navigate to the Google page, or it will throw an error because some server is down or something is down. So there is a possibility of this page getting loaded, or it might not load, correct? So now it has loaded. Sometimes if the server is down or something got crashed or something is down, so your page will not load. So there is two possibilities. One is success and one is failure. So success, it's okay. What if it's a failure? So how do we handle those? So that's how we do with exception handling. Any questions?
I'm good, Bharat.
Okay, how do we handle exception? Let's take, for example, the small example that we're taking here, conversion of, I'm getting an input from someone from a form, like for example, he should give a product quantity or something like that. So either he can give 2 or a, but our code should be good enough to understand whether it's an integer or an alphabet. So public void, you exception test. So I'm getting from an outside, I'm getting a string. So that's of type str, and I'm trying to convert this string into integer. These are all functions which are all inbuilt. So here it will be like int temp is equal to integer dot value of. So this integer dot value of, integer is a class in Java library. So we have Java library, right, which we have all the things. If you want to work with any integers to do a conversions or anything, you have integer class. Like for example, you have string as a string class, you have integer as an integer class. So then once you convert it, you do sysout and control space and print the temp. Again, it will just print it. So now I'm just calling here public main, here only main method, and I am creating a new object of this class only, but main doesn't belongs to this class because it is static one. Okay, static ones only belong, it doesn't belongs to object. New exceptions dot. So we have one method exception test in which I am passing one here, so which is a proper condition. We will test that first and then we'll go by the second test. So right click, run as Java application, click on OK. So it worked fine because you passed one. It took as a string, it tried to convert a string to integer, and proper integer, because one is a proper integer, and then it took the integer and it printed out the integer again. So if I pass like say 1 2 2 2 3, so still it's an integer and still it should work fine. So it's working fine. What if I pass an alphanumeric value? So it is giving an exception because it's not a number, it is giving a number format exception. Okay, so there is a base class which is called an exception, parent class is exception, and exception has been inherited to number format exception or some array out of bound exception. So all those different, there are a lot of childs. So for example, in the Java library, right, you have exception is the parent class of all the classes, parent of all the exception classes, the parent class is exception. From that you have inherited to Java number format exception, or different exceptions. Like you have lot of exceptions that you can do, customized exceptions, number format, array index out of bound. Array index out of bound is array has some size, like say 5. is the size. And if you're passing an array with the number 6, right, with the memory location 6 or something, it will throw an error. So that is array index out of bound. So you'll have runtime exception while running Java program. You're running something and it will throw an exception. You'll have runtime exception. But the common feature or the common class that we have is exception, and that is inherited to number format, array index, and every other exception here. So it's still like, I can show you a diagram, but so it is basically, you should understand in the inheritance that we have learned, right? Exception is the base class, it's a common class, and every other class, like all the specific exceptions, are getting inherited from the common class called exception. So that's how it works. So exception is parent of all these things. You can generally, like, if you don't know the any specific exception, you can still call the base called exception. Okay. So now how do we handle it? Now we say that I know that there is there is an exception that is getting that we are getting it. How do we handle it? So in Java we use try block. So wherever you are thinking that you will get an exception, we'll do a try block. And once we try, it will get the exception and we have to pass it on to catch block. And in the catch block you can throw an exception. Okay, so here you can say that sys out. So you can just pass an user message for the user, right? Like instead of throwing this Java error, like see, if you're throwing this error, the user, whoever is passing this info and submitting it, he doesn't know what's going on here. You can say the value that you have entered is not numeric. Okay, so now let's try this. So now because you passed the non-numeric number, it is throwing an exception. So it comes to this lines, and so it comes to this line. It is telling that, okay, now whatever you have passed to me, it's not, so here it thrown an error. So once it has thrown an error, it went into the try block, from the try block to the catch block. In the catch, it caught the exception, whatever you are getting it, and it throwed the exception, or it has given the information to the user saying that whatever you are sending out is not a numeric number. Please go and redo that. So for example, now you change this and then you just run this. If you're passing in a normal scenario, you don't get any exception. So if you're just getting the number, it is just printing here. See, this line of code got executed. If you're not passing this number, then what happens was, so it will throw an exception here. It will not go to this line. Instead, it will go to the catch block and print this number, print this value. Like the value that you have entered is not numeric. Go and correct it. So like for example, if you enter an email on the form, it will tell that the email that you have entered is already present in the system. How does it know? It will just do a comparison and it will tell you. Or if you're giving a password which is not following some format, so it will tell you like, okay, this password format is wrong, because it is going and comparing, saying that, okay, this is it, this is what it should like, but you're getting an exception. So the user should get message like this. Or you are passing some age as non-numeric value. It will tell you, okay, it's age and you have to pass a numeric value. So for example, all these things, there is a possibility of an exception. Means instead of having a right value, you can place a wrong value, and you are trying to catch it, because whenever if something goes wrong, you're trying to get the exception and you have to throw the exception. Clear? Or any questions?
Can you repeat this once again?
Okay, so whenever we are doing any action, so any action, okay, load browser or pretty much, for example, here I have to enter in an input field age, I have to enter 1 to 100 value. Okay, so I have given a user a text box, so text box to enter the information. So in the text box, he can either enter 1 to 100, or he can enter number more than that, or he can enter alphabets. But I'm not restricted anything to him. So here what he is doing is, first time I'm passing a value called 1, which is proper, like age is from 1 to 100 and you are giving 1. And if you say save and if you just pass that, it's working fine because you entered the right value. What if this person is not passing 1 and if he's passing a? Okay, so there is a possibility of getting an exception. That's what we have seen, right? So there is an exception that we are getting it because whatever that you are entering as a string, it is trying to convert that to an integer, and the one that you are, whatever you are passing as a string from an input, it is trying to convert an integer, and if the string is not an integer, then it will fail. Okay, but a is not an integer. The user that he is passing is, it's not passing 1 to 100, he is passing a, which is not an integer at all. So the code will, throw an exception saying that I don't know what you are sending. So it will tell that it's a number format exception. So that's what you are getting it here when you are trying to do this. Okay, like for now, if you say run this, so now you're getting an exception, because for the input string a, exception in the thread main java.lang.number format exception for the input string a, because a you are trying to convert to an integer and that's not an integer, so it is throwing an exception and the code doesn't know what to do from then, and it failed completely. So if you throw this message to the user, like when you are browsing or something, and if you throw this message, the users, whoever on the website, will get panicked. So how can we resolve it? We have to tell that whatever you have entered here is not a number, go and enter a right number. So how can we tell that? We can use try catch block. So we say try this code, because there is a possibility of getting an exception of number format exception here. Try this code and catch if you get an exception or you get a number format exception. Okay, exception or number format exception, you can do anything. So catch the exception and try to print that exception, or try to tell the user that why you are getting that. So sys out, so you can tell the user that the value that you have entered, because you entered a and it failed completely. So because you have a try catch block, it failed and it went into the catch block. It tried this code but it failed and it went into a catch block. So if this code is not there, you will get this. So now because this try catch block is there, it tried to execute this, it failed and it went into the catch block, and now it is, you are telling to the user that okay, you whatever you have entered is wrong, please go and correct it. That you have entered is not numeric, please enter a value between 1 to 100. So now the user understands, okay, what did I do wrong? In the form that I am submitting, I have given a number that is a, so I should not do it. I should give between 1 to 100, which is like say 99. So now you do redo it, you will not get any errors. It will just print 99. I mean, you have submitted the form properly. So you have a possibility of getting an exception here, because your code is taking that as a string and then converting into an integer. An integer can be only which is numeric, and because your input is a string, you can pass numeric and non-numeric values. So when you pass a non-numeric value, you are having a chance of getting an exception, and that exception, if you get, you are trying to handle it and you're passing to the user, go correct it and redo it. Got it? Or any question?
I got it, Bharat.
Okay, there are other things also, but this is the basic thing. Okay. Any questions, Sid?
No, I'm good, Bharat.
Okay. So now what if I handle the exception? Okay. So for example, I have another exception. Okay. So now I have another exception, public void array exception. I'm just creating one more exception. This is, I mean, by default, we are trying to create it. So now I do something like I have an array. Array is I'm storing like say 5 names um, or 2 names. Okay. Um, that is string array names is equal to new string array of 2. So which is the length of the string array is 2, and I'm trying to store 2 names in this names column. Okay. In the memory, I wanted to store 2 names. So where can I store? I can store string of 0, which is names of 0. So here if I go, names of 0 is equal to first name. First name is like the name one, like say Ram. Okay. So I can my length is 2. I can only store two values in this array. Names of 1 is equal to Raj. I have two names now. I'm entering the third name, which my location doesn't have it. I mean, my size is only 2. I've already restricted it to 2, and I'm trying to add the third value here. So, which is another thing called something raw. Okay. So now I have 3 names here, but my size is only 2. It can only store 2 values. So, but now there is a possibility of getting an exception because it's going beyond its size. Okay, the size is only 2 and you're going beyond its size. So now let's go and call this one also new exceptions dot. I'm not creating an object, I'm directly calling it, because otherwise you can also do exceptions exp is equal to new exceptions and exp dot exception test, or you can directly write this. Okay, so I'm not calling an object or something like that. These two are two different objects, and then dot, and then I just do array exception directly. Okay, so now if I run this, click on OK. So it is giving me array index out of bound exception because the size of the array is 2 and you're trying to enter out of bound, like you're trying to enter 2, which is of the memory location 3, and you're getting an exception. So now the point is, like say for example, I'm going and trying to browse. Okay, I've typed a website, some tst.com. Okay, and then just enter. Okay, it went into something, but for example, the website that I've entered is not present, and or I've given a wrong thing. Like say I wanted to type google.com. So instead of typing google.com, I typed like say 1 O missing or something like that. Okay, it's my mistake. So, and I've entered a wrong field and I've just tried google.com. So the first action is typing this and navigating to the next page, and the second action is going and searching something here. Okay, so for example, if the first action itself has not loaded, means the website itself is not loaded, there is no point in continuing to the second action, correct? So if I have 10 actions in a sequential manner, like I'm going into amazon.com, I'm trying to search for the product, add the product to my cart, and just go and shop them. So if my amazon.com product itself is not loading, okay, can you rejoin? Okay, if the product itself is not loading, then there is no point, right? So first, for example, now it is coming from here. This is first thing is like say load page. Okay, the second one is here the action is search. Okay, so if this action itself is not happening, then there is no point in continuing to the second action, correct? So you can either stop here or you can continue to the next action. There are two things that you can take. You can take a decision that whether you have to stop here or either you have to continue. So that two actions that you have to take. Okay, so now let's go and run this program. So what's happening here is whenever you find the first exception, like say for example you're trying to load some page and you're getting an exception here. Okay, but still you handle that exception and you're going to the next one. Okay, so for example I have a here. Okay, so now what happened was you first one you got an exception, but you still did not stop your program. You went into the second one. Okay, so if you want to stop the program whenever you got the first exception instead of continuing the program, then what you can do is you can say throw exception. Okay, so when you throw an exception, what happens is, so it will just stop the program. Okay, so now whenever you got the first exception, you just don't want to, continue the program, and you just wanted to throw the exception, and you don't want to continue anymore because there is no point in continuing. In that places, you can use throw as something which will throw the exception. Okay, so if you want to just, instead of throw, if you just wanted to catch, or if you want to just handle the exception and you wanted to continue, then you can just write your code sys out, and you can just give the information to the user, and you just wanted to continue or you don't want to continue, you can take an error saying that user to pass an info. So now you can just pass this info, and you can say here throw e. Okay, so that means you just pass the message to the user, and still you will get this error saying that, okay, the first one you get this error, you can suppress this. Okay, you just don't need to get this, and we can just print different ways, but you can just say, or you can just leave it as throw. And you can just run this, and it will just go and first give the message, and it will pass the exception here. So the point is, there is a decision that you need to take whenever you get an exception, whether you have to continue the code or whether you have to stop the code. Okay, so when you have to stop the code or when you have to continue is based on purely your example, or your whatever you are doing at that point of time. So for example, if you're loading a Google page, or if you, for example, I've said, like, if you're loading an Amazon page and you're trying to do multiple things and your Amazon page itself is not loading, then you don't need to, if you don't want to continue anything, you can throw the exception and stop the program. So what if you handle all the exceptions by using a catch blocks is, you go to the amazon.com, your page will not load, and you don't have this throw statement, it will continue to the next one, and it will go to the second exception. Like, you're going to a search page and you're trying to search, you still handle the exception, still the event did not take place, and you go to the next one, everything looks successful, but nothing happened. Okay, so in a project, when you're doing an exception handling, you can either handle the exceptions, or whether you can stop the program whenever you want it to stop. When you have to stop the program is based on your thought process, okay, or what you are doing at that point of time. So there are two possibilities. One, you have to throw, either you can throw the exception or stop the program, or either you can continue the program. So for example, you did everything and you're trying to close the browser, and browser did not close. So then there is no point in throwing the exception, because your browser did not close, your instance of the browser is open. Still, that's fine, because it's the end of the program, and you don't still, you can just handle the exception and you can close the browser, or you can retry and close the browser. But at that point, it is not important. But your first page itself is not loading, or one search, or the whole page itself is not loading, then you have to stop the program. Okay, any questions, Sid?
I'm good, Bharat.
Amrita?
I'm good too.
Okay, Uma, are you there?
Yes, Bharat, I'm good too. I read you.
uh, okay, I'll just read. So I'll take another example here and we'll do it again. Okay, so i have i have I have exceptions. So exception is anything that goes wrong is considered as an exception. So whenever you get an exception, there are two possibilities. Either you can handle the exception, or either you can throw the exception. So handle the exception means, if you just have, it means it's, if you have a catch block and you're just trying to catch the exception and you don't do anything else after that, then you're just handling the exception and still continue the program to the next level. So if you are throwing an exception, means you stop that program that then and there, because you got an exception and there is no point in continuing the program anymore. For example, we are trying to test a website. So for example, we are trying to test a website which is called amazon.com. Okay. So as I said, there are two things that we are trying to consider. Okay. Public void load Amazon page. Let's think like a testing thing here. Okay. Load Amazon page. And you try to write a code in the automation which tries to load an Amazon page. Try and use sysout, and you try to write some code here. I'm just putting a print line, but here we'll write some automation code which says that load Amazon page. So there is two things possible here. One is either it can load Amazon page or either it could not load Amazon page. There are two possibilities here. And you write a catch block here and you try to catch the exception here, which is exception E. And you can just say Amazon page has been not loaded successfully here. You can just say sysout and you can say the page not loaded successfully. So this is your first action. Okay, the first action that you're trying to do. So in the similar fashion, I can do one more action. After that, the second one is I am trying to search for some products. Search for products. When I'm searching for products, I can either search successful or do the search. Here I do the search, and if the search is successful, I don't get out. So if the search is not successful or if something is broken, I'll still get an exception and I'll say to the user, search page not working. Okay, so now I have handled the exception here using a catch block. Means if my Amazon, if I create an now object here, okay, so I'll create a main method. In the main method, I'll create exceptions. I can do like this also. Exceptions exp is equal to new exceptions. I'm creating an instance of the same class. Exp dot. So here I have to call the first one, load Amazon page. Where is that? Okay. Something was wrong. Okay. Exceptions dot load Amazon. This is the first one. Exp dot. The second one is search for products. Okay. These are the two things. So first I try this and then I go to this and I try this again. So first I'm trying to do this and I got an exception. For example, here I got an exception and I'm trying to catch this exception and I caught that. So my page itself has been not loaded. When I catch the exception and I don't throw the exception, then it will go to the next function, search for the products, which has nothing to do there because there is no point in continuing from here because your page itself has been not loaded. Okay. So then here you can say throw exception, throw E, because if the page has been not loaded, there is no point in continuing anymore. Similar fashion, if the page is now successfully loaded, page has been successfully loaded, the products page is broken. Then adding to the cart, the next one is adding to the cart. You are continuing to that is makes a point, doesn't, right? So you can add here also throw exception. So, but when you're trying to close the page after doing everything and you're trying to do the same thing, there you can just handle the exception. You don't need to throw an exception because at that point of time, the decision is, even though if your page doesn't close, that doesn't mean you need to continue anymore. So that's the end of the statement. So you don't need to do anything else. So there is two decisions. You have to take decisions. We'll see that in the coming classes, all these things. But for example, I'm just giving an example. So whenever you get an exception, there is one thing, whether you have to continue or you have to stop your program. If you want to continue, means you have to make a decision that the one that you are doing here is validation is not so important and you can still continue. If you want to stop it, the validation that you have done is very important and there is no point in continuing anymore because of this. Okay, so that's how we handle the exceptions. So we use whatever we have to handle, everything that we put it in a try block, and whatever we have to handle using exceptions, that whatever we have to give to the user, we put it in a catch block. If you want to stop the program, we use a throw command which throws the exception. And if you want to just continue, just leave the throw program and throw here, and it will just not continue. It will handle the exception and stop, continue to the next line. Any questions?
I'm good, Bharat.
Uma? Okay. So, for example, if you want to do, retry logic, like for example, if you want to ask user to do something at the end, or try to reload the page if you get an exception, you can write a finally block. The finally block is nothing but no matter the try catch, no matter my try catch is my catch is or try is working, finally will still execute. Means for example, I do try, I do some catch, finally I have to clean something or go to reload the page to the previous page. So I have an Amazon page, I try to load the page and it was not working, and I have to go, I'm on a search page, I can go to the home page. So what I can do is finally will execute no matter whether it has executed try catch or whether it has executed catch, or at the end it will go to finally. So here you can just go and say whatever, if you have any cleanup program or if you have to do or tell the user, because if there is anything, you can just tell in the finally what you have to do. Um, um, if you get an error, then what you have to do finally. So you can just mention it here and it will just clean up or it will do whatever you have to do as a cleanup program. Okay, but this is not too important for you guys because you don't still use finally as much. But finally is the end action that you wanted to do on that function based on whether what is the output of try or catch. But this is not too important for you guys. Okay, finally and all, like it's way ahead if you're like using developers and all, so you can just use it. But finally is something which will get executed no matter whatever it is on try or catch, and it will tell what if some actions fail or some actions did or something you have to clean up. Like you wanted to clean up some objects that you have created here. Okay, like you have created an instance of something or something, you can just clean up in the finally block and you can release the memory or something like that forcefully. So, but this is not too mandatory for you. Just telling you, like there is something called finally, and no matter it executes whatever, it will still go to the finally, and it will, if you want to clean something or do something, so you can just write those statements here to make it clean. So that's about exception handling. Okay, so any questions? Okay. So there is one more class that is from Java that will be pending. I can take it in the weekdays. So tell me good time. Tomorrow, is it a good time? Anyone, everyone? Or day after tomorrow too?
I'm okay. I'm okay tomorrow.
Amrita?
Sid, I can't make it tomorrow. I have a meeting till 8:30.
A day after tomorrow, Monday, Tuesday.
Yeah, day after tomorrow I'm fine.
Uma, can you hear me? Or okay, day after tomorrow you're fine, right, Uma?
Yeah, her audio is not working. It seems. Yeah,
Okay,
she's
okay, day after. So we'll have it Tuesday. There's only one class. That too, it's very. I mean, half class I'll be like fine, and then I'll start Selenium from the next class. Okay. So
yeah. Oh,
Tuesday, um, just ping me in the afternoon. I mean, somehow I might get late or something. Last time I slept completely. So
okay.
so just ping me before.